Okay, so I want to talk about a current area of research that's important to me, which goes under the loose title of openness. I'm interested in not only open educational resources, but what I would call the open paradigm of education more generally. And associated with that, what I call open knowledge production. And that involves a series of nested and converging movements based on open software, open access, open archiving, open publishing, open journal systems. Let's say at a material level, we are talking about internet platform, Web 2 technologies as they are responsible for enabling new forms of scholarship, new forms of research, and also new forms of pedagogy. Now that's the central question for me. And as a philosopher, I want to approach that both really in two ways. One is to understand the contestability of the notion of openness. And I want to trace that back to the classic liberal defenses of the open society. So that takes me to people like Henri Bergson, to Karl Popper, The Open Society and Its Enemies, volumes 1 and 2, Friedrich von Hayek's defense of open markets. The relationship really between Popper and Hayek is the dominant liberal, post-war liberal view, which is a defense of the liberal society. Now, the question is, to what extent do these new forms of openness actually map on to those political justifications? And I think they do and they don't. I mean, I think there's clearly some obvious connection through the work of George Soros, who began, the Open Foundation, the Open Institute. He was a student of Popper, and he's responsible for promulgating and developing various forms of open access and open access mandates and so on. And clearly also they don't, because there are concepts of openness, and this is really, which I think is really kind of important, both philosophically and practically, in terms of political economy, that show that there might be a form of knowledge capitalism, or let's say forms of knowledge capitalism based on openness, or let's say the apprising of opportunities to do with open innovation and so on. And there are also forms of knowledge socialism, which are much closer to the original model of the Royal Society of London, the original Royal Society of London, which is based on a series of normed peer review values and visions related to the public good and public good science, which are, I think, institutionally only a few hundred years old, but at the same time, they prefigure a whole range of new global public spaces and global knowledges, which I think provide some very useful and interesting models for informal education, even if there is a kind of national institutional, let's say, resistance to these forms. And I think that we see it developed mostly in areas with the emergence of forms of global science, which involve international cooperation through science portals that are aimed at questions like AIDS, climate change, and the development of technologically enabled mass education.